I don't think you're gonna love my new job.
You can't expect your uncle to start you out at the top.
Janie, I never said anything about Uncle Louie giving me a job.
I don't understand. You walked away from the department and a good paycheck. Why else?
You know what I've always talked about.
Remind me.
Well, think about it. You should know me better than anybody. We are engaged.
Well, I know what you've always talked about doing, but it's so impractical. A little boy's dream.
Thanks for the show of confidence.
It's just not realistic. These days, particularly.
Well, it's what I'm doing.
A private detective. You're going to be a private detective.
Not going to be. I am one.
Did you even think about asking your Uncle Louis for a job?
Not really.
I mean, why? Why did you quit the department anyway? Over that awful shooting? These things happen.
I hadn't told her the whole story yet, what really transpired up at Nitty's handbook. But now I did. By the end of it, she was angry.
They just came into Barney's and grabbed you. Didn't even tell you what they were up to. Louses, bums. And I suppose they expect you to testify for them at the Nitty trial.
I will testify for them.
Then why quit then? If you'd stayed with the department and testified, you could get something out of it. Why help them cover it up and get nothing?
I am getting something out of it. A private investigator's license and a gun permit. So I can do business. Mayor Cermak himself guaranteed it.
Oh, Mayor Cermak. Well, that's different.
I told her about the Cermak meeting, and it impressed her. And I told her about the Nitty hospital visit, and that scared her. But when I told her about General Dawes, she perked back up.
Why don't you take advantage of the General's offer? $3,000 is like $1 million.
$3,000 for supervising pickpocket security at the fair would be easy money. It'd make my first year in business a rousing success, even if not a single other client walked in the door.
And it would be just the beginning. You get something much better out of Dawes and your uncle. You could get a real job with a bank or a business or something.
Janie, I do have a real job. I am in business. I'm president of the A1 Detective Agency. I'll be first in the yellow pages.
Where do I fit in? What about the house we talked about?
Look, I still have the nest egg money in the bank. I managed to start up the A1 without dipping into that, thanks to Barney's largesse.
How does Barney factor into this?
I told her about my arrangement with him for the office space, playing night watchman, about the furnishings he'd provided, the works.
He's a good friend.
Give me a year to get my feet under me and we could start looking for that house.
It's not like there aren't foreclosures available.
Happy now?
Happy. Nathan, you know I only want what's best for you.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, the never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, moi, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 1089. Wow, it's February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day. Last night, I went and saw Wuthering Heights. I went for a twofer, double feature, another double feature. Me and Alvaro are trying to hit a double feature every week for the year. We went and saw Wuthering Heights and Crime 101 last night, and tonight we're going to see Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, and Cold Storage. B-movie heaven as far as I'm concerned. Gore Verbinski coming back. He's been gone too long. Looking forward to both films. I don't really know anything about either one of them, and I kind of like that. I kind of decided, I did see the trailer for both, and I'm going in cold, but all I know is that Cold Storage has viruses, fungi, I don't know what, something. Zombie outbreak. I'll watch anything with disease vectors, and ever since I read Biohazard by Ken Eilbach and Deadly Feasts, a book about prion-based illnesses and where they came from, Man, no, actually, Graham Masterton's Plague and Stephen King's The Stand, which I read in 79. When did The Stand come out in paperback? I got it from the Sci-Fi Book Club, but I didn't read it until I got it in paperback. Anyway, I just love subgenre of horror, plagues. Give me anything about diseases, I will read it. I just love it. I love the downfall of civilization because of a virulent pathogen. And maybe when, artificial superintelligence comes along, some terrorist organization is going to create the ultimate pathogen and I can live my fantasies. Who knows? I hope not. Anyway, other things I've been watching that I think you should all catch up on. I do not care what people think about Ryan Murphy's The Beauty, which is actually an adaptation of a comic book, lest we not forget. What a fucking hoot. I feel like I've not read the original comic book of The Beauty, the graphic. I don't know if it was individual comics or a graphic novel. I don't know anything about it. But John Suntress from the Word Balloon podcast told me that he knows those guys and I should have them on the show or talk to them. Yes, I should, John. We should why don't all three of you come on? We'll talk about The Beauty. It's a hoot. I feel like I'm reading an incredible splatterpunk novel I bought at an airport in 1986. Can't get enough of The Beauty. The new episode, the structure of this show is all over the place. There's a thrust. It loops around on itself. It comes back around. Who knows what it's just. This was a big flashback episode, which I really liked. I mean, you just never know what you're gonna get. Is it good? Don't care. I love it. Now I'm not gonna say it's not fucking Andor. It's not The Sopranos. It's not Wise Guy. It's not The Wire. It's not The Twilight Zone. It's Ryan Murphy doing some trashy body horror sci-fi stuff. Love it. I love it. There's literally a musical number in this episode. I kid you not. It's a dance number. It might as well be, Broadway Melody of 1936 or whatever. Just randomly inserted. Did I care? No. Did I love it? Yes. Another thing I finally caught up on was Mr. Scorsese, which is Apple's 5-part drama done by Rebecca Miller, the great Rebecca Miller. It's a 5-part documentary series about Martin Scorsese. It's fantastic. I loved it. It's not as comprehensive. That would have taken 5 more episodes, but I really loved it a lot. But there was something in it. There was something in it that I've been talking about this myself, but I'd never heard somebody else espouse this idea, even though I think people all know it. I want to say it was when he was talking about Goodfellas, and it was right when he was talking about going into the Copa, the famous tracking shot that they famously adapted, Doug Liman adapted for Swingers. But he says something interesting. He says, and he's almost tossing this off, Scorsese is. Marty, never met him, love to meet him. But he says that he couldn't quite get the philosophy of the shot. And that, in my mind, had something, he was addressing something that I have believed always. Now, I'm a fan of B-movie making. I grew up, I went to drive-ins, First time I saw Motel Hell and Cronenberg's They Came From Within was at a drive-in. And I love B-movies. And I worked at Full Moon. And one of the things that you can tell, the difference between an auteur, in my mind, and just a journeyman filmmaker, is that every shot has a philosophy behind it. And do I mean to say that it's Kant, or it's Proust or what? No. But in a way, your shot, every shot, and even coverage, if you're having a conversation between people talking, every single shot in a film should have a philosophy behind it. And I've always believed that. I've always thought that was true. But I never thought, I don't know why I never put the word philosophy. I just thought that I would say meaning or something has to be behind it. Unfortunately, I've only directed one movie and it didn't make any money. So I've been trying to direct other things, but I ended up producing instead. I still want to direct more. Hopefully I will. And hey, using AI, maybe I can. No, but I would like to get out on set with actors. But that's the difference between a Martin Scorsese movie and so many other directors' films. His films, and if you watch Mr. Scorsese, you watch this documentary, you see that he was drawing storyboards when he was a kid because he had asthma, and the way he looked out at the world on the street that he lived on from his, walk-up window. And you see in this documentary explains how he became a filmmaker, where his philosophy came from, and how he was designing shots in his mind since he was a kid. Steven Spielberg, if you watch was it Firelight? If you see his early work, he was thinking in terms of philosophy behind his shots. Now, one of the things that I'll tell you about myself was I was so enamored when I was a kid that I'd pick up a Super 8 camera that I just filmed anything, that was enough for me. Now, it's clear when you even you see student films and you saw films that Scorsese was making with his friends on the roof of buildings when they're playing Roman senators, and with Spielberg's early work too. You could see that these gentlemen, they were thinking in terms of philosophical camera shots. Now, I've worked on enough low-budget films, first-time filmmaker movies, where, they tend to think in how they see. So everything looks like it's shot in a 50-millimeter lens, which is how we see. I've always thought that all my favorite directors, they do interesting things with the camera. You can shoot a movie on a 50-millimeter lens. Luca Guadagnino shot Call Me By Your Name on one lens size. Whole movie shot with one lens. You can do that too. But he had a philosophy behind every one of those shots. So the shots are different. A lot of first-time filmmakers, a lot of low-budget filmmakers, a lot of people that aren't experienced filmmakers tend to not have philosophies behind their shots, so their movies are boring. And the best example of this, look at there. What do you see? David Lynch as John Ford. If the horizon is on the bottom, it's interesting. If the horizon is on the top, it's interesting. If the horizon is in the middle, it's boring as shit. And he's right. Because cinema, we want to see the world differently than we perceive it in real life. I think that's one of the primary things that you want to do when you convey, when you're making a movie. And I think one of the reasons we all love great visual stylists in film, such as Kubrick, how he used the center frame and wide angles, and no one shot a movie like him. He's unique. And in a way, Wes Anderson kind of followed along in certain ways. But when you see a Wes Anderson movie, he's showing his philosophy is right there. When you watch a Wes Anderson film, it's Wes Anderson. You know it. The same is true of like a Miyazaki animated film. You're watching Miyazaki. Spielberg, if you look at the way he can take a single shot and move it through an establishing into a 50-50, into a single, into a close-up, and back out. This scene when he's packing and talking to Marcus Brody and Raiders. You can go watch Cinema Sticks or whatever and see all this stuff. And think about that. But it really made me think about the philosophy behind the shot. And he's absolutely right. And Martin Scorsese is the master of that. And you get to see like what he was doing with Raging Bull and all that. And it's something that's innate. It was burned into him, not because he learned it necessarily, but because he was absorbing something from the movies that he was watching as a kid. And he was, in a way, learning on his own, and his brain was processing this information, and he developed through the years his own singular style. You also learn that when he made Boxcar Bertha, his first mentor, John Cassavetes, said, hey, look, don't make that shit anymore. You got to make a personal movie. And he made Mean Streets, and about basically the people he knew from his neighborhood. You even get to meet the person in this documentary that Robert De Niro's character was based on in Mean Streets. I cannot tell you how joyful Mr. Scorsese is to watch. And I warn you, Alvaro told me this. I started watching it at 11 o'clock at night. I had to go all 5 hours. I'm telling you. It's like when I watch Torchwood Children of Earth. It's 5 hours long. I started watching it at 1 a.m. I was like, fuck it. I'm going to watch this whole thing. I'd never seen Torchwood. I had a man crush on Captain Jack, but when I watched Torchwood, oh my God. Euros Lyn directing. How come he hasn't leapt into feature filmmaking in America? Don't know. Torchwood Children of Earth. You've heard me talk about it before. I'll talk about it again. Anyway, just some thoughts. Rando thoughts. Now, my last episode where I read Isaac's article, not all of it, but I linked to it, and it was designed to be incendiary, bringing up the left and the right and Star Trek. Yeah, was that clickbaity? Yes, and it worked. I got a lot of comments. I got over like 250 comments on that article, which for me was pretty good. But I have to say, once again, shout out to everybody who watches this channel and shout out to the people that interact. You guys are great. And the commentary, whether I agree or disagree, I think for the most part, it's elevated commentary, which I guess speaks to the people that I attract. I mean, look, I'm an acquired taste. If I'm a taste at all, let me tell you. But I do appreciate the cogent commentary from all of you, which we're going to get into. I don't usually read the comments. And don't worry, I will get back to reading letters. I haven't read letters, but there's a lot of commentary, and there's a couple things I want to read. But I want to get into the commentary about it. But look, I might complain sometimes about people who cover Star Trek that I watch, and like Steve Shives and Jesse Gender. I watch all their videos, and sometimes I have a love-hate relationship with what they were saying. Jesse Gender put out an interesting video about the discourse. She's very upset about the discourse behind or surrounding Starfleet Academy. And I want to speak out. First of all, I want to talk about right away that I've appeared on a lot of people's YouTube channels, and I don't care how big your channel is or how small your channel is. If people ask me to be on your channel, for the most part, with my busy schedule, and I usually say yes to everybody, but then I get busy and I sometimes might not get back to people. But I don't think appearing on anyone's YouTube channel to have a discussion means you are condoning or condemning anything they've said. Like, if somebody has somebody on their show that I have nothing to do with, and I go on their show, it doesn't mean that I'm condoning or condemning anything else they've done in the past. I like The Critical Drinker. I like Gary from Nerdrotic. I have done great streams with Az. We reviewed The Prisoner. We reviewed Squid Game. We did Hot Toys. I like Az. I don't ask everybody to like the people I stream with. They don't have to. But they should understand I stream with people that I can have a conversation with and people that actually I like. You might not like all those people, but that's okay. But I would like to think that wherever I choose to go, I don't think I've ever gone on a YouTube channel and had a conversation with somebody I didn't think was worthwhile. And I stand behind that. And I will go talk to anybody about anything. And what's so interesting is when I get pushback from people who want to, you're this, you're that, because you talk to somebody. You're the one with the problem. You didn't listen to the show. You didn't listen to the exchange of ideas. And you come at me and you're branding me something. That is the antithesis of what this channel is about. The antithesis of what it's about. And I get so angry when people come at me like this. I've invited many people to this show who disagree with me. I have an open door policy. If you really want to come on and have a real conversation about, hey, if you hate something I've said or you think I'm a complete douche, please come on the channel and let's have a conversation about it. So few people who have come at me, as a matter of fact, 0 people have taken me up on it. There are people that want to come on my show and talk to me. But when people have a serious disagreement, I'm not interested in just talking to anybody who wants to talk. But if somebody has a serious disagreement about something I've said, that's what I want. I want them to come on, and you want to come destroy me and take me down, I'm all for it. Come on. Come on the show, man. Let's have a conversation. But to that set, in the spirit of that, I would like to go through the comments of the last show about Star Trek, right wing, left wing, and let's just read through some of these comments. because I think that they're correct. Taj is at Raheen says a toxic obsession with misguided gender and identity politics is not the equivalent of being a leftist. I can easily argue that the Kurtzman universe is more right-wing than classic Trek outside of substituting different genders, sexualities, races, etc. Bottom line, this is the wrong lens to view the show's problems, though. If you remove identity... Oh, hang on. I didn't realize I did. If you remove the identity nonsense, Kurtzman Trek still sucks, but you will likely have a different group defending the slop as well as a different group attacking it. I don't disagree with that. Ranger 1 says, is that a reference to Buck Rogers in the 23rd century? Or is that Ranger 3? With regard to Star Trek, at least, I feel that you and I are twins separated at birth. Backgrounds, blueprints, technical manuals, and just what was the Defiant doing on the edge of Tholian space anyway, I had to know. Star Trek to me was bursting with glimpses of untold stories, and I wanted to hear them all. It lit my imagination on fire. Edited to add, not just Star Trek, we think alike on a lot of other cultural issues as well. I think they're connected. People who really love Star Trek or Tolkien will tend to agree on a lot of things. I agree with that. Medallion says, I think the left and right need to find common ground to allow the true spirit of Trek to have meaning. Or America itself, 100%. Major Laser says, wait, is this guy actually arguing Starship Troopers is not a parody? Well, if you go back to the original novel, Verhoeven will be the most surprised. It's well known to be a parody of nationalism, jingoism, fascism, basically extremist right-wing politics. I would say sort of, but yeah. Major Laser says, the woke often produce great art. What a dog crap article. Again, is it? You commented on it. Again, I'm just presenting different ideas that I like from all across the spectrum. Got True Noir on Audible and cannot wait to listen. You're the best, Rob. Well, I want to thank you for that, Jason Koch. As you heard a scene with Katie Sackhoff, and you heard Michael Rosenbaum as Detective Nathan Heller. Katie Sackhoff plays his fiancée, Janie. Very proud. True Noir is finally, we've been selling it only on our website. We finally have worldwide distribution, international distribution everywhere. You can get True Noir all over the place, everywhere you get your podcasts from. And you know what? Now that there's the Star Trek Con podcast, written partly by David Mack, very excited. I can finally go head-to-head with Star Trek. I can say, look, I had Mystery Writers of America Grandmaster Max Allan Collins adapt his own novel, True Detective, the first of his 19-novel Nathan Heller series. And you know what? You can listen to the Con miniseries or audio drama, and you can listen to True Noir, and you can decide for yourself, in terms of the level of quality. And I'll say the Con miniseries has a lot going for it. But I've got David Strathairn, I've got Anthony LaPaglia, I've got Michael Rosenbaum, I've got William Sadler, who played Sloan on Deep Space Nine. And many more. Nicholas Turturro even. Barry Bostwick playing FDR. I'm so very proud of True Noir. But now I have something that I directed, produced, edited, something new in the world that I'm very proud of. Judge me on that. And I put it out there, and I'd never done an audio drama before, but it's nice to be able to compete on a playing field with, say, official Star Trek. I've never really been able to do that. So compare and contrast, if you will. Cinematography as art is dead, replaced by woking. Well, I don't know if cinematography is dead. I think cinematography is art that's very much alive and well. I think you think cinema is, which maybe is true. Cape Town Coffee says, to me, it is quite simple. The woke left are puerile, spoiled infants that break what they cannot control and then blame others for their actions. I think there's some truth there. I think that we have a lot of people that have grown up unable to take criticism. We have infantilized our young people to a gross extent, and it's a bummer. El Studerino says, Wow, what a loaded article. But yes, it was. That was the point I was trying to make. I remember watching TNG on TV in the 90s, and it did feel like religion was dying and science was taking over at the time. The question for me is, why has Christianity made a resurgence? Why do we have people who are anti-vax when vaccinations have really extended human life for more than almost doubled it in 100 years? Because another religion is migrating to the West? Also, does someone have to be a paragon of virtue to imagine and write about a better tomorrow? I certainly don't think so. I would have liked to hear more of your thoughts on the article, but great show as usual. You always give me something to think about. Cheers. Well, I appreciate that, El Studorino. You're going to hear more of my views on this today. Let's look at what this reply says. Religion. Todd Jones says, religion isn't making a resurgence. It's just a few well-known nut jobs who pay lip service to religion but don't actually practice it. Churches are still closing all over the place. That is very true. So, give you that. Skyboxer Sports News says, Rob, love your show, but I think that Paramount is not making Starfleet for us. I've had low expectations. I'm pleasantly surprised with this series. One of the reasons for it is that I've accepted that they are not making the show for you and I. We are already fans. They are making the show for new fans of Star Trek. They did that once before. They made the motion picture for OG fans. It did not connect with everyone. Actually, the motion picture was very successful. So they did Wrath of Khan for the action fans, or shall I say the new fans, direct hit, best ever, time will tell. Okay, I hear this a lot, and it drives me crazy. Not that you drive me crazy, but it drives me crazy that people say Star Trek wasn't meant for you. I discovered Star Trek when I was 5 years old. It certainly was not made for me. I wasn't even born when Star Trek was conceived and made. I was born during the end of the first season of the original series, May of 1967. That's when I was born. Star Trek wasn't made for me at all. I didn't discover it until 1972. What was compelling, and I think what's compelling about most entertainment of the 20th century is, I mean, sure, a lot of it was about the time in which it was made. But Star Trek, there was an effort made, and as I would say, coming on the heels of the John F. Kennedy White House, the Camelot years, I have said that Star Trek was a show, an aspirational show, where people that believed in America, and specifically the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights, our republic, that we carried those values that made America great into space. And the extrapolation that Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn and Dorothy Fontana and Ted Sturgeon and Sam Peoples and Harlan Ellison, the implication that they were making in or through their work was that as humanity grew and evolved, we would become better. That there was a certain way that once we became people of Earth, not Earthlings with different ethnicities, but once humanity moved off the planet and interacted with other entities, other life forms, other aliens, the ethnicities on Earth would cease to matter. And if you're 3 centuries, I mean, you know, the 20th century was when Star Trek was invented, but if you were 300 years in the future and we are now a spacefaring race, we would not be black humans or Asian humans, or we would be, or white humans. We would just be humans from Earth. And the aliens wouldn't care what, I mean, our skin color would just be a function of where people's origins were on the planet based on their environment. You know, when the cradle of mankind, Africa, there was more sunlight there, so people's features developed accordingly. And as we moved out across the world, but once we left the planet and became a spacefaring race, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And once you start procreating with aliens, it doesn't matter if it's Octurian, baby, even though that's not a Star Trek reference, those kinds of things would also cease to matter. So as we moved out, the more important thing, and what Star Trek would do, Star Trek would, the problems that aliens have would be problems that we could recognize, and our evolved humanity would hopefully help people surmount their problems because we would have already learned them. And, you know, in the 60s, people talk about, like, yes, while they had Kirk was a ladies' man, sure. But it's not like, he wasn't abusive, and he was a smart man that appreciated women. And if you looked at a lot of the women that he was involved with in the course of the original series, they were very sophisticated people. And, his crazy girlfriend wanted to be a starship captain. She was exceptional as well. She just went, and that happens too. There was a lot of crazy men. Richard Daystrom using his own engrams on the M5 computer. I mean, you had a black man, William Marshall, he of Dracula fame, or Blackula fame. He was cast, nobody said anything. A black man was cast creating the computer system that powered all the starships, that ran our starships, and no one said anything. That was the brilliance of Star Trek. You'd get Percy Rodriguez to outrank Kirk. Nobody ever went, how can a black man outrank Captain Kirk? Because in the future, it wouldn't fucking matter. Now, they got away with it as much as they could. And people were saying, well, Star Trek was always woke. No, Star Trek was not woke. Star Trek was trying to extrapolate what an inevitable future that faces humanity would be. Gene Roddenberry did not make Dr. Daystrom, who created the M5 computer, but more importantly, created the duotronic circuit that ran the computers that ran the starships. He did that because Roddenberry knew that in the future, our little petty squabbles or our petty prejudices that were Earth-based would have been surmounted. Because if we were a space-faring race, all of those differences ceased to matter once we were interacting with different alien life forms. That was the whole point, that we would evolve beyond our stupid, petty differences where you look at people that had more or less melanin or very different hair or whatever features. We were no longer people of various land masses or regions on Earth. All of us became people of Earth. That's not woke. That's an extrapolation on the future that probably will come true if we don't get destroyed by AI. So and by the way, that is humanity's destiny. Our petty squabbles over our various physical differences are stupid. They're stupid. You know what? There's nobody on Earth no humans on Earth that can't procreate with other humans. You know what that means to me? That means we're all humans. We're humans from Earth. That's it. Now, we have cultural differences. Those are more interesting to me than physical differences. When I see somebody bitching about Lupita Nyong'o maybe playing Joan of Arc, I think Lupita Nyong'o is one of the most beautiful women on Earth. But then again, I pretty much find most women beautiful. All shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are more limited in their palate, shall we say. Let me just say, I've put my tongue in a lot of places, and it was all good. But anyway, I don't mean to derail the conversation. I'm just saying that that's what was going on with Star Trek. People, it's always been progressive. No, it's also, it's progressive, yes, but it's also extrapolating what I think the inevitable reality of it should be. There was a common sense to the progressivism of Star Trek that can't be forgotten. And you had people that were creating it that were thinking about how it would work in general terms. They didn't zero in on every single different color of the rainbow because that's not what the show is about. That specificity could be interesting. That's why episodes such as The Host, the first Trill episode in TNG, when the Trill, when Beverly Crusher fell in love with Odan, and then his humanoid host died and was replaced by a female host, the Trill don't have a problem with that. And there's a great scene where she says, I just can't go there. People have certain preferences. And, she was in love with Odan as the joined symbiote and the humanoid together. And, people have their own preferences. You can't hold that against them. And it was a really interesting way because the episode, the Trills were not judged. And the fact that a Trill symbiote could be a man or a woman and get married and be in both, talk about a truly trans person that goes in and back and forth, it would have no difference. A Trill symbiote would have to understand all kinds of the differences between all kinds of genders and could swap and not have a problem with it. That was why Trill hosts had to be well trained, and not everybody could do it. Of course, all that was thrown out the window with modern Trek because nobody bothers to extrapolate about the reality of if A, B, C, and D are true, E, F, G, H are also true. That's what great writers do. They sit down and they world build. Modern Star Trek, the people who have created modern Star Trek, they don't world build at all. They have no backstory. They don't world build. You can say that Kirsten Beyer, who came out of Star Trek novels, does. Certainly David Mack is incredible in terms of Star Trek world building. But for the most part, TV writers aren't trained in that discipline because they don't have to be. TV writers come into a world that's already been created for them. But with Star Trek, that world is constantly being created. And one of my problems with modern Star Trek is the people that come in don't have any interest in learning about the world that they're working in. The world that has a believability that's been built out over decades. And that brings me, before I read more comments, to Starfleet Academy. The reason that I dislike Starfleet Academy so much as a TV show is, let's go back to first principles. It's not really about Starfleet Academy. It's called Starfleet Academy. Now, I would say Starfleet Academy has been something that has been referenced in Star Trek since the very beginning. Kirk talking about his days at the Academy. In the episode Shore Leave, we meet Finnegan, his nemesis, when he was at the Academy. So we've been talking about Starfleet Academy since the very beginning. Now, what is Starfleet Academy based on? Well, the idea of whether it's a military academy, it's basically West Point, or the Air Force Academy. Think about it. It's analogous to one of our military academies, which means the people that go, or you could say it's a top Ivy League school. And that's why I would equate it to shows like The Paper Chase that people don't know what that is anymore. Look up John Houseman talking about the Socratic method. I've been saying this till I'm blue in the fucking face. So there is an expectation of how Starfleet Academy would work, which means that if you are tasked with making a Starfleet Academy TV series, I would think before you have to start, you have to sit down and ask yourself, well, what would Starfleet Academy in the 32nd century be like? And I don't think the show has done anything credible to make me believe that the Starfleet Academy that they're portraying is anything like the Starfleet Academy we've either heard about on Star Trek or actually seen illustrated on Star Trek. Really, the first thing that came to mind, besides seeing Finnegan in the first season of TOS, is the coming-of-age episode of TNG in the first season. And it's one of the better episodes where Wesley Crusher has a very interesting test that he has to complete, not even knowing it's a test. And then, of course, when we see the first duty, we actually go to Starfleet Academy in the 5th season. We meet Robert Duncan McNeil as Nick Locarno. There's so many interesting things. A Starfleet Academy, if Alex Kurtzman equates it to Harry Potter and X-Men First Class, I would say, Alex, you first of all, there's a series of novels in the 90s that many credible Star Trek writers actually wrote about Starfleet Academy. But the very show that you purport to be working in, you are working in it, has already shown us what Starfleet Academy would look like. And you and your writing staff should be able to extrapolate from what we've seen and extrapolate from any other TV show or movie that is set at some kind of institution of higher learning. You should be able to extrapolate and come up with 10 seasons of stories. Instead, we get this weird amalgamation, like one episode can't focus on one thing, and then suddenly you decide that Beta Zeds have powers we've never seen before, where somebody can scream and just take out a bunch of people, which doesn't make much sense, nor is it very Star Trek-y. And the problem that I have with the show of Starfleet Academy, there are people that will watch it at face value and not think about these things. I'm like, look, you chose to work in a genre that is readily, it's been established since the beginning of motion pictures and TV. There's always been shows or movies that have been set at places of learning where you've seen students. But the task that you chose for yourselves was to show us in a credible manner what a Starfleet Academy set within the Star Trek universe would look like. You have failed miserably. And that's why I hate Starfleet Academy. I don't believe it. I don't think the writers believe it. I don't think they've done a credible job creating a believable Starfleet Academy based on what we've already seen of Starfleet Academy in previously existing Star Trek shows. I don't recognize those characters. Those characters exist only in that show. There's nobody I believe in. There's nobody that I think is credible. Nobody is well written. And I don't believe anything that Starfleet Academy is showing me. Now, other people are just willing to believe because I think a lot of people are just accepting what is being thrown in front of them. But what our great fantasy and science fiction does is it has to make us believe in the unbelievable. And that's what I think Starfleet Academy fails at doing. Which is sad because Star Trek already pointed the way to you. But you chose to look like everybody in modern Star Trek. I don't want to look at Star Trek. I'm going to go look at this, or I'm going to go look at that. Now, you could say that, Rob, isn't that what you're saying? That people should look outward, like the stories, Star Wars was inspired by Kurosawa. It was, but it was also inspired by a reality that institutions such as military academies exist. And those things should inform the writers as much as anything else. Anyway, let's read some more comments from the last show. Video Hunter says, conservatives can't write compelling sci-fi because they aren't creative and they have no vision of the future. The identity politics whining is completely out of date. The president is literally posting AI videos of the Obamas as apes and terrorizing minorities with his Gestapo ICE agents. Now, a lot of that is true, but I would say I gotta hold you. Conservatives can't write compelling sci-fi. I think that's just flat out wrong. People that have conservative values, true conservatives, can write great sci-fi. And there's a lot of conservatives that are incredibly creative. I would say that J.R.R. Tolkien was probably very conservative. And he wrote one of the great masterpieces, fantasy masterpieces of all time. The problem that I have with this is the fact that you are willing to group all conservatives under an umbrella and you discount everything they have to say. This is, I think, wrong. And I think true conservatives, I mean, people like William F. Buckley. If you might not like William F. Buckley, but you can go watch him and make up your own mind. The problem that I have now is people throw around labels in a very intellectually dishonest way. Someone who's conservative is just that. They're conservative. I'm a classical liberal. I'm willing to run into where angels fear to tread. A conservative would say, hey, man, but listen, before you do that, let's talk about this and what are the ramifications of what you're about to do. According to you, conservatives have nothing good to say. I would say that conservatives would have many good points to make that might be well heeded. Look, for instance, investing money in projects, it's better to be conservative. Look, should I have invested in Bitcoin in 2009 when I had the chance? Yes. But you could say, I'm not going to invest in that shit. Cryptocurrency is not real. Why would I do that? That was a conservative point of view to take. If I wasn't conservative and was willing to throw in some scratch, I'd rather have bought Hot Toys figures back then instead of investing in cryptocurrency. Boy, was I stupid. But I'm just saying, you can't write off conservatives now and throw a blanket over all of them. That's not fair. That's also intellectually dishonest. And that's one of the problems I think that we have. Nothing is either or. Todd Jones says, it's similar to why you can't have good right-wing comedians. When they try, you get crap like Gillis. Again, that's an opinion. And again, casting a wide net. Look, the right, I'm so tired of being called whatever. You're a libtard, Dem. I hate when people, Dem, that's so lame. And it just points, it paints you as being an idiot. It shows that you're not interested in any kind of intellectual inquiry at all. You've just already made up your mind. So you're not listening. You're not open to anything, which means you're not open to any kind of a dialogue, which means you're useless. In society, you mean nothing because you only believe one thing and you're intractable in those beliefs. So we can't agree. We can't talk. How are we supposed to accomplish anything? Look, man, if the levee is about to break and you're hearing Zeppelin in your mind and you're thinking, okay, none of us want the levee to break because if it breaks, the entire community is going to have a problem. Does that mean that we can't get together and fix the problem together? Or are we going to say, like, I'm not going to talk to those libtards. I'm not going to talk to the Dems. We're not going to talk to the conservatives. Man, the levee is still going to break. We got to fix that shit. We have to put our differences aside and not block somebody like, unless I get my way over here, I'm not going to help you fix this problem. Okay, great. Let the community be flooded under the onslaught of whatever, mud, water, whatever. Great. That's terrific. That is not productive. What Star Trek has going for it is that that's not very Star Trek. We got a problem we have to fix. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. The levee's going to break. And it isn't just going to be a Zeppelin song. I'm telling you. So, Los Lobos, great band. I agree with some of what the article says, and I disagree with some of it. I do believe Star Trek is dead and Kurtzman Trek is a skin suit, and I'm okay with that because I can watch those good shows anytime and forever. That's true. I don't ever have to watch Kurtzman Trek. It doesn't exist in my world. Starfleet Academy isn't aspirational, and it isn't a vision of what we will become in you're right about that, the future. It is what the left and Hollywood are today. It is the world outside their door, and thankfully, it is a small world that most of us don't want to have to live in. Not bad. Was that the one paid for each time you use the word woke? Yeah, you know what? I'm not a big fan of that word. And he did use it too much, I would say that. C-Star List says, couldn't agree more on the need for first principles and actual dialogue. Thank you. Thanks for putting some sanity out there, Rob. Also, as always, your thought-provoking deep dives are just the best. Thank you for sharing. Resurrected Starship says, I really don't think there would be any right versus left talk if the writing was good. Totally agree. Star Trek has always been left. The problem with Star Trek now is that the left-wing perspective within the show is that it's kind of contrived. Think about how Elon Musk was hailed in season 1 of Discovery. Stupid as fuck. I feel like the article you were reading, around 55 minutes, is kind of using the left as a straw man here. You're not wrong. When it has always been the ultra-conservative right wing, which has historically led to people like Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Mussolini, and Trump to rise to power. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I just wish we had real Star Trek now to combat this now. Look, I think that Star Trek has a lot of conservative values in it, but it was about the push-pull between the two. I bring you to an episode like A Private Little War. Kirk and McCoy get in the argument. Should the Klingons have been supplying the village people with weapons? The hill people, Tyree and his people, don't have the might to fight back, so Kirk says, no, we have to reach some kind of military parity between two groups. So we're gonna arm the village people. We're gonna arm the hill people so they can fight against the villagers. And McCoy says, you're condemning these people to decades of war. I mean, that was a great dialogue between different ideologies and what it is that we should do. It also was talking about the Prime Directive, even though the people on that planet knew about spacefaring races. John Smith says, what are you talking about? Stalin and Mao are the definition of the extreme left. Yep. Resurrected Starship says, they pretended to be at first, but at the end, It'd be about tricking the uneducated masses and killing the intellectuals. What McCain's called stirring up the crazies. That was Mao's Cultural Revolution. Nothing to do with what Americans call liberal values in the culture sense, which is why I can't abide dumbassery. See, again, even on this message board, even on these comments, people are talking, which I think is great. And I very much appreciate that. And if nothing else, what Star Trek used to be was a place where we could have these kinds of conversations. I mean, my problem is people want to think in terms of absolutes now. My side, my way, or the highway. And I don't believe that. I think there's great ideas to be found everywhere. The problem is we've stopped looking. Everybody wants to be affirmed. Everybody wants to have their opinion be the one that is listened to. And I get that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, for me, it always comes down to we live in a society that is full of problems. And that, for me, how is it that we can make human life better? That pretty much is my first principle. What is it that we can do to make our lives better? Where do we begin? And if you think about things like, okay, if we're all looking out for ourselves, and you don't care about anybody but yourself, civilization's going to collapse. We're going to have no cooperation. Nothing will occur, and we will never advance. But when you start cooperating, like, okay, there's 4 of us, and one of you can be a farmer, or we can all plant. We can all and what Star Trek was about. We create something according to our gifts. We build something better than just what we could build on our own. And that is what civilization is. Civilization is figuring out, okay, we all need to eat. How can we collectively make sure that we eat better? And when I say collectively, here's the thing. Here's why I don't believe in collectivism. Because human beings all like certain things, they all desire certain things, and they all want to do certain things. I would not want to live in a world without a virtuoso jazz band or a jazz trio. I don't. I don't want to live in a world where human beings cannot excel at what they can do. I like living in a world where human beings are miraculously talented or can do amazing things. When you read that Mandani wants to get rid of gifted children's programs in the New York educational system, that's ridiculous. There are kids that are just naturally gifted. They should be encouraged. We should encourage human excellence. To try and make everybody the same that's a zero-sum game. You're not going to get anywhere with that. Human beings will naturally have ambition. You can't quell that. You have to encourage that. And you know what? It's a danger. And that's where maturity comes in. As Spock said in Space Seed, superior ability breeds superior ambition. Now, how do we as a civilization manage superior ambition? Well, as long as it can be personal, that's one thing. But if you want to lord over your ambitions over everyone else, that's problematic. But that push-pull is how a civilization grows and learns. Anyway, I want to move on. I could look at more comments. There's a lot of great comments in this last show. I just wanted to throw out a few and show that there's pretty good dialogue on this channel, and people have it going and are keeping it going. There's a lot of commentary. I suggest everyone look into the comments on the last show, and I want to thank you all for doing so and being so thoughtful. It's exactly what I would hope that this channel can be. So let me see here. I'm going to look and see what people are saying. If you have a super chat or tip to leave on the show, you can. Bo Edmond says the only one that can save Star Trek is RMB. Make it so, number one. It's not up to me. I don't know if I can save Star Trek. I can make it better, though. Word balloon. John Suntress comes back and says, IDIC means accepting peeps who disagree with you. That's right. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And this comes from Matthew McGee. Says, hi, Rob. I love the Terry Trek shirt. Yes, and I got that from the guys at the Popcast. They made it. Picard Season 3 was probably my favorite Star Trek in the past 20 years. I agree. Always enjoy your streams, and thank you for recommending so many great Star Trek novels. There you go. Major Chai Chai, oh, you're so sweet. Major Chai Chai says, we're proud of you too, Robert. Well, I would say Major. Thank you for your service. All right. Ryan Miles just gives me a thumbs up, or a thank you for the support. Fearless Wolf says, studying existentialism just now, identity, freedom, the other. Watching Trek fans argue too woke versus too right is the modern version. Same power struggles, just new labels. People project their fears onto others. Totally. Ryan Miles says, big UK fan. Highly respect your opinion. I appreciate that. Very much so. Thank you. Captain Robert April, friend of the channel, says, Gene Roddenberry tried an Academy show back in the 60s when NBC wanted spin-offs. It didn't work for a variety of reasons. It's true. Roy asks, are you still involved in the Axanar project? Projects like these still give me hope for Star Trek's continued legacy. I have not been involved with Axanar for 9 years. I left in November of 2017, but I wish them the best. They keep saying they're going to finish. I mean, they did a sound mix on the first of their 2 episodes. Where is it? I mean, do I have to do another audio drama? I mean, I've already edited how many features and produced how many movies since I left the Axanar project, and it's still not finished. Let me just check and see. Stubble McShave says, he sends in a tip, and he says, I've been rewatching some Deep Space Nine. I just watched Explorers. That's a great episode. Loved the evolving friendship arc between O'Brien and Bashir. Totally. That's a great stuff. Fred says, I just got IMAX tickets for Epic next Friday. Can't wait. It will be amazing. Are you talking Project Hail Mary? Because those tickets went on sale. Rob, happy birthday. Happy Friday the 13th. And happy Valentine's Day, says 1001 Johnny. Well, right back at you. So speaking of what Stubble mentioned, of Deep Space Nine, I was talking with my friend Alvaro. He's who I'm going to see the double feature with tonight. And I said on the other show, a lot of people talk about how Deep Space Nine completely corrupted Gene Roddenberry's ideals, that it's the anti-Star Trek. And I've totally never understood that, because what Deep Space Nine is maybe the most Star Trek of all the Star Trek shows, in that it takes the ideals espoused by the original series and Next Gen and puts them to the test. And it shows that the secular, humanistic, optimistic vision of the future will not fall even against an onslaught of galactic proportions, or a quarter of galactic proportions, bent on eliminating the human race, or every race in the Alpha Quadrant. And look, and to that effect, I found some articles that I wanted to share, as you might have guessed. Now, this is amazing. So I always look for articles. I look for stuff to read all the time, and I'll throw something out. Like, I was looking for, I mean, yes, I have a premise. I want something to read that would sort of tee up what I think about Deep Space Nine, but through the words of someone else. And I found a website, I kid you not, about the Mega Bears fan. Now, I believe that is the Chicago Bears. Mega Bears fan. And Mega Bears fan wrote this article. So I'm not going to read the beginning, because the beginning, we all know, explained Deep Space Nine and what it was. But we're going to get to the section of the article that I wanted to read, which is here. Star Trek has always been a preachy show. It has always proudly worn its progressive values on its sleeve, and that's part of why I love it. Whereas the original series and Next Gen were mostly concerned with getting up on a soapbox and preaching those progressive ideals, I don't know if that's true. Deep Space Nine is more concerned with the challenges of putting those ideals into practice. Amen. Deep Space Nine is a much more pragmatic show than its predecessors. Its conflicts aren't easily resolved, if they can be resolved at all. Deep Space Nine looks back into itself and asks, where might these ideals, as notable or as noble as they may be, start to break down? And then asks, can we still hold on to these ideals after they've broken down? Deep Space Nine takes the ideals of Star Trek and the Federation and it challenges them. It puts them up against complicated real-world scenarios and asks its writers and the audience if these ideals can survive the meat grinder of real life. Yes. Part of what makes the show work for me is that the answer is almost always yes. These are achievable ideals worth striving for. But it's not easy, and you often have to make compromises to get there. This is summed up nearly perfectly in a classic angry rant from Cisco about the Federation's official response to the Maquis terrorism in the Season 2 episode, The Maquis Part 2. I would normally play this, but I always get hit copyright struck by Paramount, so I'm just going to read it. And I won't read it like Avery Brooks. I'm just going to read it like me. You know what the trouble is? The trouble is Earth. On Earth, there is no poverty, no crime, no war. You look out the window of Starfleet headquarters and you see paradise. Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but the Maquis do not live in paradise. Out there is the demilitarized zone. All the problems haven't been solved yet. Out there are no saints, just people. Angry, scared, determined people who are going to do whatever it takes to survive, whether it meets with Federation approval or not. One of the criticisms of Star Trek in general is that you might hear is that life in the Federation is depicted as being too easy. People have virtually unlimited resources. Everything is provided for them. They want for nothing. If they work at all, it's because they want to, not because they need to work in order to make money to make ends meet and put food on the table. From a story writing standpoint, this can limit the options for the conflicts that the writers can create. I've heard plenty of anecdotes about cases in which writers have expressed frustrations with the limitations that Gene put on them. From an audience's standpoint, life in the Federation can seem unrealistic, maybe even unbelievable. Plenty of critics, especially on the conservative or regressive sides of the political spectrum, have levied complaints about the incredulity of the show's depiction of a post-scarcity economic and social structure. This is despite the fact, or perhaps in response to the fact, that some futurists and economists predict that this generation could see the beginnings of a post-scarcity economy by the middle of the 21st century, if our modern politicians have the political will to work towards making it a reality. Such an economy would be fueled by a variety of factors. One is the decline in the reliance on scarce fossil fuels and minerals due to cheap, abundant green energy from nuclear fusion, solar, and wind power. Another is the possibility of automated asteroid mining to provide mineral resources and eliminating the need for environmentally destructive mining on Earth. The proliferation of 3D printers and other means of self-production would reduce or eliminate our consumerist needs for massive global corporations to provide those goods and services. The growth of gig economies and personal entrepreneurship would reduce or eliminate businesses' exploitation of the workforce. The abundance of energy and materials would dramatically reduce their cost to the point that, as a simple practical matter, it's easier to distribute it to everybody than to charge individuals for access. This would create a standard of living in which even the poorest can potentially have all of their basic needs met without necessarily needing to hold full-time jobs. And any jobs that they do take would be on the workers' terms and using their skills to earn extra cash to meet desires beyond their basic needs for food, water, electricity, and shelter. In 2023, if all of this looks attainable, and some of it is even starting to look familiar, it's just a matter of whether all this productivity and resource wealth ends up belonging to the general population, or if it is all consolidated among the already wealthy. I only hope that I live long enough to see this new economy start to take shape. That is the world presented in Star Trek. It's a world that some people find unfathomable, others find it morally objectionable or outright offensive, often invoking the boogeyman of socialism. It's not socialism because it's not about making everybody the same. Star Trek does not want everyone the same. Star Trek wants people to, according to their gifts, do what they can do. And, Steve Shives in a show that he did a couple of weeks back talked about that the right wing always calls the Star Trek universe a meritocracy. There's somebody in this comment thread that says Star Trek has to stop being about elites. And I would say, no. The very premise of Star Trek is that you are watching the best of the best. And these are people that have worked for what they've received. When I'm watching, say, a show about, The Social Network, the movie The Social Network, you might not like Mark Zuckerberg right now, but I love all the people at Harvard because they're all really smart, capable people. There's the scene when the Winklevoss boys go in to the dean of Harvard. They want some payback from Zuckerberg. And the dean says, all the students at Harvard are starting their own businesses because they're all exceptional people. That's what we want. That's what drives human evolution and drives human ingenuity, is when you have the best of the best out there. I always looked at Star Trek as, I'm never going to be as smart as those people, but I'd certainly like to know them, and I'm glad they're out there. Good for them. Starfleet Academy is full of mediocre people that I see every single day. I don't believe that any of those characters are going to get anywhere in life. They should all be dead by the end of the first season the way things are going now, unless they pull out the magical Beta Z scream in order to vanquish your aliens, which makes no sense at all. They just made up magic. And look, all of Star Trek's technology, I get it, is magic. But we all know the difference between magic and science fiction. And modern Star Trek is all magic and very little science fiction. It's all fantasy. Deep Space Nine tackles the criticism head-on by providing deep, provocative, and often nuanced looks at the lives of the characters and the situations that they encounter. It contrasts the post-scarcity democratic socialism of the Federation with the robber baron capitalism of the Ferengi. It contrasts the liberty of Federation governance with the totalitarianism of Cardassian martial law. It contrasts the secular humanism of the Federation with the religious fundamentalism of the Bajorans. But the thing is, they're religious fundamentalists because they do indeed have their prophets in the Celestial Temple right off their port bow or right off the edge of their planet. They might not be gods as we know them, but they're there. They're non-corporeal beings that live outside of time. I'd worship them too. So they might be fundamentalists, but they're not wrong. DS9 doesn't just bring these cultures up as aliens of the week, solve their problems, and then move on, never to see them again. It doesn't cast our heroes as the white savior, or at least it doesn't lean on white savior narratives nearly as hard as TOS and TNG did. DS9 sticks with these cultures, immerses the audience in them, and shows us the long-term impacts of their interactions and decisions. It gives the audience a relatively deep and nuanced look at these cultures, and by the end of the series, we come to really understand the Ferengi, the Cardassians, the Bajoran cultures on a level on par with those of the Klingons, and that's to say nothing of the way that the show provides an unprecedented look at how the Peaceful Federation deals with total war. I think we can see an excellent contrast between Deep Space Nine's storytelling philosophy and Star Trek Discovery's philosophy by looking at the resolution to the main conflicts of both series. The first season of Discovery, anyway. Deep Space Nine depicts the longest, most violent conflict that has ever been depicted in Star Trek, the Dominion War. Discovery's first season is largely about a war between the Federation and the Klingons, which, by the way, was totally ripped off from Axanar. Just saying. That war with the Klingons in Discovery ends when Starfleet operatives smuggle a weapon of mass destruction onto the Klingon homeworld of Kronos. They threaten to destroy the homeworld and its billions of inhabitants, and destroy the Klingon seat of government and military leadership if the Klingons do not withdraw from Federation space. It is a threat of terrorism. An ultimatum of mutual destruction. There are no shades of gray here. This is absolutely, unequivocally dark, fatalistic, and nihilistic. Deep Space Nine Dominion War, on the other hand, is resolved by two events. The first is the military coup on Cardassia to overthrow the totalitarian Dominion rule, a democratic uprising by an oppressed people in an authoritarian state. This puts the Dominion on the ropes, but the final act that ends the war isn't an act of violence or a threat of destruction. It is an act of compassion. The Dominion is beaten. Starfleet could just blockade the Founder homeworld and threaten to obliterate the Great Link from orbit if the Dominion doesn't surrender. They could take the path of discovery, but they don't. Instead, Odo and Kira offer the founders a cure for the plague, which, to be fair, was deliberately introduced into the Great Link by the Federation Black Ops, but that's not the point here. This is an act of mercy and a gesture of good faith in an attempt to not only end the war, but to hopefully normalize relations with the founders and the Dominion by showing that cooperation could benefit both parties. Again, I reiterate, the Federation is one. They do not have to offer this olive branch. In fact, by curing the Great Link, they run the risk of the founders rebuilding the Dominion military and staging another invasion of the Alpha Quadrant in the future. But helping a defeated and suffering peoples is the right thing to do. By the way, we've seen that here on Earth. America helped both Japan and Germany get back on their feet after World War II. We could have bombed both countries and killed everybody in them, but we didn't. But helping a defeated and suffering peoples is the right thing to do, so it is what our heroes do. They act as role models and do not stoop to the level of their enemies or lower. This is the subtle but substantial difference that separates Deep Space Nine's final season from Discovery's first season. Discovery argues that conflict is resolved through force or ultimatums, and that peace is maintained through terrorism and the threat of mutual destruction. Deep Space Nine argues that conflict should be resolved with empathy, mercy, and compassion, and that true peace can only come about through benevolent cooperation, gestures of good faith, and a recognition that both parties are stronger when they work together. In this way and many others, Deep Space Nine tackles how political realities and concessions affect those on the ground. Sisko has another great speech in the third episode of Season 2 titled The Siege. Seriously, Sisko has probably just as many great speeches as Picard does. Probably more, actually. Anyway, in this episode, a political coup on Bajor forces the Starfleet personnel to abandon the station, and Sisko says, "The Federation is here at the invitation of the Bajoran Provisional Government. Governments can break off relations with an edict. It's not so easy when it comes down to our level, though, huh?" He goes on to highlight a Starfleet crewwoman who is engaged to a Bajoran national and a Starfleet father whose child worked closely with a Bajoran student on an award-winning science project. He speaks about how everyone has made Bajoran friends and have come to care about the Bajorans as people. And now the government has named them enemies of the state and they must evacuate. The idea continues on later in the series when it starts to focus largely on the Maquis, who have been deemed terrorists by both the Cardassian Union and the Federation because they've decided to fight back against Cardassian occupation after the Federation ceded territory to the Cardassians in a treaty. Next Generation had a few episodes about the Maquis as well, but the Enterprise has the benefit of being able to leave the situation behind and move on to its next mission. Being located upon the Cardassian border, the crew and civilians of Deep Space Nine, however, remain targets of Maquis threats and violence and cannot simply wash their hands of the situation and move on. One of my favorite things about Deep Space Nine is that its more nuanced approach to storytelling leaves a lot of more shades of gray. The writers often leave the audience as the ones deciding if a character's actions were just or moral. This is one of the great points of modern Star Trek. Deep Space Nine told you what to think about. It gave you questions to ponder. It did not tell you what to think about those situations. Modern Star Trek tells you exactly what you're supposed to think. And more than that, it says if you don't think this, there's something wrong with you, the viewer. That's bad writing. And that's not what great storytelling does. Great storytelling instills questions in the minds of the audience. But Alex Kurtzman has said time and time again, he's interested in using Star Trek as a medium to deliver his own Sermon on the Mount. Let me tell the viewers what you should believe. Well, with your fucking groomed haircut and those glasses, who's going to listen to you, dude? You're a rich kid, pretending you're a fucking messiah. Enough of that bullshit. You and your writers are you guys all think that you know what's right for everybody. You don't. You're dilettantes pretending. And that's why Star Trek sucks now. You can't even tell. You can't even have the conviction of your own premise. I mean, my God, Section 31, did you get it? Did you understand? No. You went from one guy to having membership cards and ships and uniforms, and then you made the most god-awful Star Trek ever in Section 31. I'd rather watch Metal Storm: The Destruction of Jared Sin again. I'd rather watch it in 3D without 3D glasses. That's how bad Section 31 sucked. And now you're making a Starfleet Academy show that, admittedly, some people like it. I don't mean to take away from them, but I would say it's creatively bankrupt. You wanted to keep making money from this Star Trek franchise, so you greenlit. How many shows can we get greenlit and make? How much money have you pissed away making terribly written programming? In 25 years, you're going to still be alive, and you're going to have to deal with the legacy of the shit that you people have put out since 2017. I'm not proud of that work. Should you be? I didn't do the work, but I'm not proud to be a Star Trek fan. If anything, what's come out, and there's been bright spots, you know, I think Prodigy is a very legitimately kind of a great show. Unfortunately, it's an animated show because it would be too expensive to do in live action, even though, you know, we've seen Starfleet Academy, a little Prodigy live action, but you know how expensive that probably was to do. But terrible programming, and needlessly so. Anyway, I did link this article in the description below, so you can check it out and read that article. But here's the thing. Star Trek has already shown us, universally, I don't think there's a lot of argument as to which great, I mean, you know, clearly the writers go to like Gizmodo or fucking Medium, the 10 best episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Actually, they don't do that because they haven't watched Deep Space Nine, really. But they'll pay lip service to Sisko and Deep Space Nine, sure. Look, if you evoke Deep Space Nine, which they did, but you didn't evoke the raison d'etre of Deep Space Nine, that's me doing a French accent, probably got that all wrong. But, okay, you have a character delivering, how can you not love seeing Sirach Lofton come back, doing a great job delivering these platitudes? But those are, the platitudes for these writers have become generic Star Trek. When everybody gives a meaningful speech, that's what Star Trek is. That was part of it, sure. But Star Trek was about a lot more than that. If you're going to bring up Deep Space Nine, let's bring it back to the philosophy of the shot. What about Deep Space Nine why are you invoking it? The idea that the word emissary is supposedly the same for Sam as it is for Sisko. I'm an emissary too. No. Sisko was an emissary of the prophets. And it was different. Just because the word emissary is being used, you guys have nothing to do with one another. They don't even get into the religious implications of the fact that Sisko is an emissary. And I'm watching this, and you've got this character trying to equate herself with Sisko being the emissary of the prophets, as if they're the same thing. And I'm like, do these writers know? Do I have to sit here and watch this swill and go, you're trying to equate these two characters? When, yes, Sisko is the emissary of non-corporeal aliens that exist outside of time and space, and how the people that he was an emissary for, the Bajorans, reject him because he's an outworlder. Do you want to get into any of that? Of course you don't. So you just used a word and equated the two. I mean, talk about illiterate. It's not good. And so any astute viewer, now this is not saying if you didn't, most people know, I just want to watch it and be entertained. Well, it's hard to be entertained if you're somebody who's been paying attention for years, because they're doing a really shitty job. When they invoke nostalgia bait, it's the most empty nostalgia bait ever. It is meaningless. And usually, when I saw the F-14 show up in Top Gun Maverick, I'm like, oh my God. One, because I built a lot of F-14 models as a kid. But two, the F-14 in Top Gun, that was the fucking plane, man. You knew that shit could get the job done. So when they were able to get that plane off the ground, you knew they were going to be okay. Because the F-14 Tomcat still rocks. Bringing back Sirach Lofton was cool. The outfit they put him in was cool too. But evoking Deep Space Nine is utterly meaningless. Entirely meaningless. I'm just saying. And it's frustrating that that's what we get from modern Star Trek. Star Trek speaks for itself. I don't have to go back and explain how good the original series is. The great writing of the original series will transcend its effects. It'll transcend the high key lighting of the color of the show, or William Shatner's operatic acting, which is fucking damn good if you really look at it. And Leonard Nimoy as Spock, oh my God. I don't have to speak for Star Trek. It speaks for itself. So it's not whether it's left or right wing. Star Trek is a genre unto itself. It combines both, actually. You know, it has done a lot of different things in it, but it speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, Star Trek is a secular humanist show that is all about inquiring into the human experience, as all great science fiction or all great storytelling does. And it does even more. And I have another article I want to delve into a little bit as well. So Darth Plato says, hey, Rob, I was on a panel yesterday about best movies about a Navy surface ship, non-sci-fi or submarines. Off the top of your head, what are 5 films that come immediately to mind for you? The final countdown. I guess that's sci-fi, so that doesn't count. but Sink the Bismarck? No, I don't know. That's a tough one. Under Siege, which I just got on 4K, which is my favorite Steven Seagal movie. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to address that because I'd have to sit down and think about that. But it's a good question. Darth Plato says, if Star Trek is a post-scarcity world, then shouldn't the Federation have no shortages in any war? Post-scarcity leading to a world with no war to make war obsolete, says Ozymandias in Watchmen, stems from the Red Queen hypothesis, and it does not work. Well, I mean, yeah, but I think that if things are getting blown up, you know, if you have shipyards and you're using replicators to make those ships, if the shipyards are getting blown up, you still have to, even though you're in a post-scarcity world, you still have to manufacture things. And if you're using replicator technology to build the parts of a ship, it's still that you still need those replicators. You need that technology. So I don't know about that. I don't know the Red Queen hypothesis. I'd have to look into that. And also, it is a science fiction show, so you have to give it some leeway because ultimately it is kind of a fantasy. Let's see. Mr. Z says, one time you mentioned maybe disliking Star Trek Continues. There's a dozen in the series on YouTube, the fan film stuff. Did I mishear you? And if not, why? I heard there was some scandal with the guy that played Kirk. No, I mean, I think as far as fan films go, I think the 2 best Star Trek fan films series, especially, were Star Trek Continues and Star Trek Phase 2 or Star Trek The New Voyages. So you had Vic Mignogna's group, and you had and Vic Mignogna used to work with the people from Star Trek Continues. So you had Vic Mignogna and James Cawley's group. James Cawley pivoted, and he created the Star Trek set tour, which is astonishing. And if you ever want to do something cool like that, I would highly recommend going to Ticonderoga, New York. They now have the original shuttlecraft there. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And then Vic Mignogna, they did, I think, 11 episodes of Star Trek Continues. Yeah, Vic has had his own issues, but hey, he did give the world Michelle Speck on that show, which more power to him because, boy, is she delightful. So anyway, Lost for Word says, thanks for the show, Rob. Hours of great listening. Appreciate the open-minded, thoughtful, and fun vibes. I appreciate that. I try and keep things fun. B Things says gifted programs are arguably serving people with special needs. Gifted people often burn out without enough stimulation and challenges. Disparaging excellence as elitism is childish. Disparaging excellence as elitism is childish. Could not agree more. Yeah, I was in ELP, the Accelerated Learning Program in junior high, taught by Chip Wall, and it was a lot of fun. It was I really liked that, and it was very stimulating. Jason Webster says Starfleet Academy is supposed to be a military place of higher learning, like the United States Naval Academy. I know. In Kurtzman Trek, it's anything but that. I know. I mean, because it doesn't want to be that. And the problem is none of the people involved have ever been in the military. So it's like, come on, guys. Clarence Maxwell says, any ideas for a new show that isn't Star Trek? Everyone enjoys good stories, not a fictional history lesson that went off the rails 30 years ago. I do. Like I've told people that if I was given enough money, if someone said, Rob, I have a couple of things. One I can't talk about, but if I was given money to make something that you could all go experience, I would want to make Anvil of Stars. Greg Bears, he did a 2-book series, The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars. And in The Forge of God, here's the premise. In The Forge of God, there is an alien race that has sent out von Neumann machines, self-replicating machines, to find emerging intelligent civilizations, technologically advanced intelligent civilizations, and eliminate them before they can rise up to any level to challenge the civilization that launched the von Neumann machines, which no one knows who they are. So what they do is in The Forge of God, they drop in these devices that bore into the core of a planet. They spin around each other until they spin down after about a year, and they cause a reaction that destroys the planet from the inside. Once these devices have made it inside a planet, you can't help them. But there is another group of, call them the United Federation of Planets, there's another group of aliens that are trying to stay ahead of these von Neumann machines and save the planet. If they can't destroy the von Neumann machines, when the von Neumann machines have already been deployed, they have a year to save the entire culture and people of the planet. And that's what the book's about. That's what The Forge of God is about. Spoiler alert, they fail, and the Earth is destroyed. The sequel to that is the show that I would turn into a series called Anvil of Stars. And in Anvil of Stars, this civilization says to the people of Earth, look, it is the greatest crime that we can conceive of that somebody would destroy a planet that has an emerging intelligent civilization on it. This is the worst thing on our books. And what we then do is we create a ship called the Ship of the Law. And we take a group of the survivors from these planets, young people that are growing and developing, and we task them to use the Ship of the Law and try and find this civilization, to try and find the civilization and hunt them down and destroy them, take revenge. And what Anvil of Stars is about, it's about the civilization of young people, exciting young people from Earth, that develop on this ship while they're training to do these jobs, and they can talk to the original aliens and get advice and everything. But it's about the world that these kids create on this ship as they're training to do this terrible thing, and as they're trying to track down this civilization, this malevolent civilization. I would do it as 7 seasons. I would do the series, and I love this book series, but I especially loved Anvil of Stars. So you have a built-in premise. Earth has been destroyed by a malevolent alien race. This benevolent alien federation has given them this ship to seek out revenge. And it's about the civilization of young people that develops on that ship. Because, they have to live on their own and what they're going to do. It's far more interesting than anything they've done in Starfleet Academy. And the thing is, do they find this malevolent alien civilization? And what happens when they do? Are they willing to commit genocide even though someone else blew up the Earth? don't know. And is it only humans that are out there? And are there other ships of the law with other aliens that are completely alien to us that are also looking for the benevolent civilization, or malevolent civilization to destroy it? All these questions can be yours if you read, or answered, if you read The Forge of God and Anvil of Stars. And I would love to make Anvil of Stars. Problem is, like so many other things, I'm not the first person to have this idea. So both The Forge of God and especially Anvil of Stars, I've read scripts for Anvil of Stars where they tried to do it as a movie. Problem is, they always tell the first 30 pages was always telling the story of how the world ends, which you don't need. I would just open the series with the Earth coming apart. But anyway, that's just me. So there you go. So that's an idea of something I would do that isn't Star Trek. Major Chai Chai says, for me, Deep Space Nine had the best character. Hang on a second. Wait, I just missed that. Hang on, let me find that again. I apologize. For me, Deep Space Nine had the best character development of all the Star Trek shows. One of the many reasons why it's my favorite Star Trek show, and Sisko is my favorite captain. I totally agree. The most nuanced of all the characters. Stubble McShave says, Bajorans are fundamentalists. If you're a fundamentalist, make sure you are in the fun part of fundamentalist and not the mental part of fundamentalist. Leave it to the Swedes, man. But the thing is, are they fundamentalists? Because the one thing about the Bajoran prophets is, one, they were real, but it seemed to me that they were always about inquiry. You could actually interact with them, with the Bajoran orbs, which apparently they're just willy-nilly hanging around Starfleet Academy now. How does that work? Think, Speak, Live Art says, why do you think fans can enjoy Academy when it's void of all the intelligence, themes, and science that made us love Trek in the first place? Honestly, there's a couple of articles that have come out that talk about how Gen Z is the first generation in 100 years that is less intelligent than their elders. I think that we, especially here in America, we have a tremendous lack. It's not just because of social media, but it's because of how we decided to teach people. Everything from how we taught reading to the fact that we dispensed with things like civics. And also, kids don't have the experience growing up anymore of it's hard to get jobs when you're 16. I mean, I had a paper route. The life skills that people learned. When kids don't get driver's licenses, they don't learn the idea, like it's instilled in your mind very quickly when you learn to drive. When we had driver's ed in school. When you're 15 and a half and you get your driver's permit and you start driving on a freeway, think about what that's like, what that does to your brain. When you're getting onto an on-ramp and you realize 55 miles an hour behind the wheel of a machine, what you are learning, you're aware that there's a big bad world all around you that you have to be aware of. People are coming and they're going, they're behind you, they're in front of you. And the entire ecosystem that exists when you learn to drive. How you have to learn etiquette at the gas station. You know, kids are not learning, not just academically, they're not learning life skills that we took for granted when we were growing up. Kids having programmed lives made sure that they didn't get to, like when a child was bored, when we were bored, we'd make shit up and go do something cool. You know, now everybody's lives are so programmed, or you are completely addicted to your screen that you're carrying it around and you're getting constant input into you, but you aren't sitting on your own, contemplating your own existence and figuring out shit for yourself. So, I don't know if that's all true, but maybe it is. Our great moderator, Tom Jr. Jackson, says, Bobby B, good to see you, brother. How is Crime 101? Is it worth seeing? Crime 101 is the second feature film based on writer Don Winslow's work. It's based on a novella he wrote. I think the novella is called Broken. I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. I didn't think it was great, but I really enjoyed the time I was sitting in the theater watching it. But it's good. I just like seeing that in the theater. I like seeing that kind of adult fare in a theater. And, Darth Plato says, Sink the Bismarck, The Cruel Sea, Pursuit of the Graf Spee, Master and Commander, and Final Countdown. I should have said Master and Commander. I would have come up with that. Did I say Sink the Bismarck? I was thinking Sink the Bismarck. Major Chai Chai says, have fun at the movies tonight. Give Alvaro my regards. I'm seeing Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die tomorrow night for Valentine's Day with the hubby. That's cool. Tom Jr. Jackson sent a Burnettwork membership out. So thanks for that, Tom. I appreciate that. Now, I've got one more article that I wanted to delve into. Hang on a second. We've got a tip coming in from Fred. Fred says, epic that I got IMAX tickets for Baz Luhrmann's doc concert movie of Elvis Presley in concert. It plays 1 week in IMAX before it goes to regular cinema screens. It looks epic. I forgot about that. I want to go. I definitely want to go. I'm a Baz Luhrmann fan, and I like concert movies. Okay, so here we have another article that comes to us. This article is 10 years old. It comes from Screen Anarchy from April 13th, 2016, and it's by Leah Matthew Brown from Toronto, Canada. And I thought I would share this article. And again, it comes to us from Screen Anarchy. Destroy All Monsters, Deep Space Nine, and the Challenge of Community. You owe Star Trek Deep Space Nine a second look. It might be a good way to drain the time between now and Brian Fuller's Star Trek reboot next year. The best aspects... if I could only go back in time and tell her. The best aspects of Deep Space Nine set a benchmark that Fuller, who started his writing career with a one-shot on that series, will be lucky to hit. Spoiler, they didn't. Revisiting Deep Space Nine quickly demonstrates what a series of lasting depth and complexity it was. Far from merely being an early prototype for what we now take for granted as modern serialized storytelling on television, it was that as well, Deep Space Nine was also a serious, textured drama centering around a core idea whose relevance has only increased since it was on the air, and may continue to do so in the years and decades to come, especially after Kurtzman Trek. As a series and as a story, it was uncannily ahead of its time, and rewatching the show now in 2016 gives me the eerie sense that the industry at large is only beginning to catch up to many of the things Deep Space Nine was routinely doing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I've been with Deep Space Nine from the beginning in 1993, and as such, I'm more defensive about it than I need to be. It began, and in some ways remains, a red-headed stepchild of the Star Trek franchise. But critical thinking has certainly caught up to Deep Space Nine. It is celebrated in many corners as the best thing Star Trek has ever done. I put myself in that camp, and I think I'm beginning to understand why. I grew up with Star Trek The Next Generation, and I mean literally. I caught on to that show the week I started puberty, and its original broadcast elapsed right through the moment I settled permanently into my adult height of 6'0". TNG taught me a lot of the framework of how to think about the basic social issues of the world that I was entering. But Deep Space Nine was the first adult television show I ever watched, though I didn't even know it at the time. The adult factor is probably what made it a dodgy proposition for Star Trek fans back in '93. To boldly stay where no one has stayed before was a running joke when Rick Berman and Michael Piller announced that they were creating a next-gen spin-off that would be set aboard an immobile space station. Even the addition of Captain Sisko's very own starship, the Defiant, 2 seasons later, did little to quell the prevailing sense of this is not what Star Trek is all about, that hung over a franchise whose big brothers and kid sister were about zipping around the cosmos in ships named Enterprise and Voyager, exploring strange new worlds. Well, perhaps Deep Space Nine wasn't obviously what Star Trek was about, but I'd argue, in foregoing the conventions of its own franchise, it did what all television series should be trying to do. Its own thing. And by doing its own thing, as well as it did, Deep Space Nine closed the loop. It transcended and then emblematized the absolute best of what Star Trek can accomplish. What was it? Deep Space Nine component elements were many. Part Star Trek, you can never completely remove the scientific exploration of space and the moral dramas that take place there from a Star Trek series. Part Western, Space Station Deep Space Nine was and remains a frontier town with a bench of supporting characters as deep and compelling as the regulars on Deadwood. Part workplace drama, which were proliferating on television then and continue to do so now. No, Deep Space Nine's Operations Center wasn't as exciting as the Enterprise's bridge and wasn't meant to be. People brought their coffee to work. But it was also often an outright comedy, bending towards satire in the thrice annual Ferengi episodes, which tackled human consumerism and misogyny and often cunningly linked the two, via the broad brush heroics of the gang of idiots with gigantic ears. The series also tilted glibly self-critical in the once-a-year Mirror Universe anthology, where our heroes would be zapped into an alternate existence where, for all intents and purposes, the rules of 1993 television no longer applied and our nominal cast members could be violent bisexuals. Deep Space Nine was also often, of course, a fantasy, and many layers deep fantasy that created Inception-like rings of meaning. It could cascade the invented frameworks of its own series Bible, holosuites, prophetical orbs, and general technobabble science into episodes where our gang could knock off a casino in 1960s Las Vegas, lead a 99% revolution in the 21st century San Francisco, or recast Benjamin Sisko as the closeted black science fiction writer in post-war America, who also might be going insane. And it was, for its final 2 years, a war drama par excellence. But here again, I'm getting ahead of myself because what seemed at the time like audience-baiting exploitation, zip zap pow, was in fact the endgame for Deep Space Nine's main project. The reason that Deep Space Nine retains its resonance in the answer to that boldly stay joke I alluded to above, the other Star Trek series were about boldly going, and Deep Space Nine was about boldly staying, both words firmly in place. Deep Space Nine is about community, and more importantly, the effort of community building. Partially informed by the aftermath of the 1992 riots, Deep Space Nine takes its central drama, the complex and sometimes year-long processes of planting your feet in a damaged community and taking ownership within it, and slowly, carefully nurturing it back to sustainable life. Ben Sisko wanted nothing to do with Deep Space Nine when he was stationed there in the series' pilot episode Emissary. The space station was essentially an orbiting gulag hanging over the planet Bajor, which had just freed itself by terrorist action from 60 years of occupation by a vindictive military force, the Cardassians. The discovery of a wormhole to a distant end of space, however, instantly turns Deep Space Nine into a way station for trade, tourism, and exploration that is, importantly, patently unready to be. The Bajorans who own the station do not have a functioning permanent government and are still reeling from decades of oppression. The Cardassians, who only recently departed, are now kicking themselves for abandoning what has turned out to be a major strategic asset. And Sisko, to personalize the political, is still grieving the death of his wife 3 years prior and raising his son Jake alone. The cast around Sisko is a heady group of abrasive personalities unparalleled in the history of Star Trek. A former Bajoran terrorist now grappling with the true responsibilities of nation building in the wake of guerrilla action. A disaffected blob of shape-shifting goo who passes his time and satisfies his OCD by running security on the station. A fuckboy Starfleet doctor who thinks he's in a Daniel Defoe novel. A crooked barman running a penny ante criminal organization in plain sight. A 300-year-old elder in the body of a 20-something supermodel. An exhausted engineer, harried family man who'd really rather just be playing with toys. Importantly, Deep Space Nine solves for none of these personalities in the tried-and-true fashion of a Star Trek episode. Okay, Sisko accepts that he must move on from the death of his wife by the end of the pilot episode, but the actual doing of that and the raising Jake in a hostile environment while balancing the demands of leadership and community building at the same time form the meat of the drama on the station for the ensuing 7 years. Quark never stops being a criminal. Odo never stops being an OCD blob of shape-shifting goo, although he does rather sweetly learn to open up a bit. O'Brien gets to play with his toys once he's made friends with Bashir, but the razor's edge adult reality of personal desires versus familial responsibilities remain as complicated and ever-shifting as it would in real life. And in the larger world of Deep Space Nine, the trials of establishing and maintaining a functional community, particularly, I'd note, a community of multiple, often conflicting cultures and religions, is under persistent threat by the larger political, economic, and natural forces at play. And the religious. Deep Space Nine remains the only Star Trek series to, without ever breaking Gene Roddenberry's commandment about the atheist future of the human race, allow that religion remains a powerful force in all the elements mentioned above: the political, the economic, and the natural. The Bajorans, a deeply religious people whose social goodwill is strongly influenced by a pope-like figure called a Kai, prove a testing ground for how hard a secular institution must work to negotiate with, allow for, and adapt to the spiritual requirements of the people it serves. These are all very real-world concerns, as I said, and they give Deep Space Nine the uncanny feeling of a television series whose modern relevance is only mounting over time rather than diminishing, like, say, the social issue of the week approach taken by Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation. This is where I think Deep Space Nine vaults over its brethren to become the shiniest example of what Star Trek can accomplish. Not because the original format's episode-by-episode morality plays were any less relevant in their time, but because Deep Space Nine's whole series approach to richly woven storytelling gives it a complex resiliency that most of the rest of the television industry is only now catching up to. This is true novelistic storytelling. I mentioned the war. Deep Space Nine reaches its apex, an apex which, I might add, was considered very un-Star Trek by many. In a pair of seasons which dealt directly with the Federation's war with the naval nation state from the other, or the rival nation state from the other part of the wormhole, the Dominion. Here's why, far from being a betrayal of Star Trek, the Dominion War is perhaps the series' masterstroke. It is the ugly, real-world outcome of the kind of community building I've described above, and which Deep Space Nine was always about. Having defined and established the kind of nonpartisan, socially liberal community that Deep Space Nine can be, and then seen that version through a variety of local stressors, Captain Sisko and the captain and his group are then forced to defend it against an outside force who seek nothing less than its obliteration. They are required, therefore, to test all of their values, established till now in the first 5 seasons of the show, against the reality of wartime. Within the series proper is a fight to survive. As drama, it is, of course, a fight to see if those values can, after all, endure the harshest possible pressure. The series' richest episodes are its 6th and 7th season. Each principle and character are tested in turn. Several, of course, meeting with the uncomfortable realization that we are only on our own best selves in the abstract and only occasionally at the moment of truth. I'll admit that last part isn't very Star Trek, at least not in the emblematic manner that Gene Roddenberry originally intended for his utopian vision of our future. But here's what is great. Here's what it is. Great art about who we are right now. And here's why it's great Star Trek 2. The characters keep trying, even with the deepest possible understanding of their failings. The future should be so lucky. Amen. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is and shows how Star Trek should be achieved in the future. Not exactly recreating Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but making it as relevant to our world today within the context of a science fiction action-adventure show. And I don't mean the characters necessarily need to be recognized. They certainly don't need to speak in the common vernacular of today. Look, I'm sorry. Maybe 1,000 years from now, somebody might still quote Casablanca. But when an alien starts talking about the sound of fucking music in the latest episode of Star Trek in the 32nd century, I'm out. I'm like, give me a break. I understand what you're doing, but that makes no sense in the context. You know, look, we still quote the St. Crispin's Day speech that Shakespeare wrote in Henry V. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. I get it. But people have been quoting Shakespeare for hundreds of years. There's a reason why it endures. Now, as many people know who watch this channel since I started, I had not seen The Sound of Music when I started this channel. I actively lobbied against it. Elizabeth tried hard, and then Sophie and Elizabeth gave me The Sound of Music on Blu-ray, and I finally watched it. And you know what? I thought it was fucking good. Doe a deer, baby. And then I bought the brand new 4K that came out this past year in 2025. I love Sound of Music, but I don't believe News Brack is going to be quoting it in a Star Trek episode, especially in the 32nd century. That to me is a failure of creativity. So, anyway, Deep Space Nine and Star Trek itself point to the direction Star Trek will take. It shouldn't be a left-wing or a progressive show. It shouldn't be a right-wing or a conservative show. It should be a show about humanity, the way it always was. And it should be a reflection of our life and times today, presented in the context of an action-adventure, allegorical, science fiction television show. It should not be a riff on Harry Potter. It should not be a riff on X-Men First Class. Those are the wrong things to look at. And if we have our Star Trek creators saying that they are looking at X-Men and Harry Potter to try and gain an audience, I would say, well, first of all, those were also created by other people, and they've cultivated their own audiences for quite some time. But as Star Trek writers, you should be looking back at Star Trek. All modern Star Trek is all the creators looking away. J.J. Abrams and Alex Kurtzman and Robert Orci. What did they do? I mean, it wasn't so much... It was J.J. Abrams. I never liked Star Trek, too intellectual. I'm going to make it more like Star Wars. Why? Since 2009, all these people that run Star Trek tried to create it. I get it. From a business standpoint, you want to be making that much money. But you know what? Slow and steady. I understand you capitalists want to hit it big. But the fact is, Star Wars has always been for the masses. Star Wars is a fairy tale. Star Trek was always niche. Star Trek should be a show that makes us want to be better people. It shouldn't show us mediocre people that we identify with, because that's the easy thing to do. Don't talk to me about Star Trek shouldn't be about elitism and show us the elites. Yes, it should. It should show us people that we aspire to be, or people that we hope will lead humanity into the future. I have no problem with that. I didn't have a problem with that when I was 5 years old. I don't have a problem with it now. I like watching shows and stories about people that are really good at their jobs with talents that I don't have, doing things I could never do for the betterment of humanity. I think that's an okay lesson. Star Trek has lost that lesson. Star Trek is telling everyone, doesn't matter. You know what? No matter what your problem is, you still matter. Well, guess what? Not in the Final Frontier, you don't. And at Starfleet Academy, you're not good enough to get in. And that's okay, because you're not going to get in. That's life. That's why you watch shows about people that can. They're aspirational. It doesn't mean you should feel bad about it. It's fiction. So why do we have to wallow in mediocrity? Mediocre writing, mediocre imagination. That's the real part. What a failure of imagination. I'm tired of that. Star Trek can save itself if people are paying attention. The problem is, the people that have been making Star Trek since 2009, they don't want to be making Star Trek. They want to be making something else. And until you get creators that are interested in making great Star Trek, your show's fraudulent. It is a product of fraudulent creation by businesses that are hoping that somehow, let me ask you this, why is it that classic Star Trek can still sell product, but modern Star Trek can't? Ask any licensee. Anyway, that's the end of this show. I'm going to see Cold Storage, and I'm going to see Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. I'm going to see two, I think, films that are inspired and by creators that knew what stories they wanted to tell and wanted to do something that they understood. Not by creators who inherited a franchise and decided to milk it to make as much money as they could. That's not to take away from everybody, all the creative behind-the-scenes people and the actors. They're doing the best they can. But if I had to read the fucking scripts from Strange New World Season 3, I'd punch somebody in the fucking face. I'd be, are you kidding me? 4.5 Vulcans? Fuck you. Fuck you. But I don't get to say that. Although one day I'd like to. By the way, anybody, Alex Kurtzman, you're invited to come on this show. I will bring anyone on this show from Star Trek that currently... Terry Matalas has been on this show. Todd Stashwick has been on this show. A lot of people that worked on Star Trek Picard, great production designer Dave Blass, he's been on this show. Half of the writing staff of Star Trek Picard Season 3 has been on this show. Any Star Trek writer or producer or anybody who's currently working on Star Trek is welcome to come on this show anytime they want. Happy to have a conversation. I promise I will be very polite and nice. And you can see that if you watch any of my episodes of Designing Hollywood or any of the interviews I've done on this channel. Throw that out there. And on that note, let me just make sure before I turn the show off. I just want to make sure that, okay, I've caught up there. I don't want to miss anyone's super chats. Hang on. In a world where one man and one gecko lizard. Let me just connect here and find out I was disconnected. Michael, let's see, Michael Altun says, please do yourself a favor and watch Stargate SG-1. As I said, I've watched the first season. I dug it. Billy D. Shillum says, can Paramount start a GoFundMe to get Deep Space Nine and Voyager on Blu-ray? Well, actually, if they did it now, they should get them on 4K. I've talked about this a lot. There's an article that's, if you look up Star Trek News, the website Star Trek News, and Rob Burnett talks about Voyager and Deep Space Nine, there's a great article. Look, people are going to use AI, and they're going to upscale the original Voyager and Deep Space Nine. What they should do, having worked on the Next Generation Restoration Project, doing all of the special features for Enterprise and especially Next Gen with Roger Lay, overseen by the Akutas, it took about $12 million to upscale. Upscaling is wrong. What they did was they went back to the negative, the original negative. The quickly, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager were all beautifully shot on 35 millimeter film, but they were posted. The entire post process happened on videotape. Videotape is 640 by 480 pixels. That's what NTSC video was, essentially. HD, let's call it 2K, is 6 times better. The resolution is 6 times better. But when it was composited on videotape, the videotape format, not just the pixels, but there's no true blacks. Reds and blues, very unstable. So the way those shows looked on videotape, because at the time, they could do post-production on video, and it was way cheaper than cutting negative. Well, what we did for the restoration of Next Generation was but CBS Digital went and got back all the negative, and they took Star Trek, The Next Generation, all the way through post again. What people don't realize is that all of the special effects in Star Trek: The Next Generation were all shot mostly from film elements. Sometimes, like with the Silicon Avatar, the crystalline entity, that was like a video toaster effect. But for the most part, you had all the model work was motion control work, beautiful stuff. And they would do like they would with any spaceship model, Star Wars, whatever, they do sometimes 10 passes. So they had 10 different film elements. Well, when they redid Next Generation, they went back to those film elements and they recomposited everything. So and now it's sort of par for the course, the difference between how Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager looked compared to how Star Trek: The Next Generation looked when it was up-resed. It wasn't, up-res is the wrong word. When it was all redone, taken through post, was astonishing. Suddenly you could see all the whole star fields. Having worked on the whole thing, it was incredible to watch. Now, the reason they stopped with Deep Space Nine and Voyager is because not many people understood what was really being done with the Star Trek: The Next Generation restoration that went from about 2011 to 2014. People figured out it's just like it looks. They didn't know what was happening. It's one of the most significant. What CBS did restoring the Twilight Zone and what they did, especially restoring Star Trek: The Next Generation, is one of the most significant television restorations in all of TV history, because it wasn't just like old shows like the original series that had cut negative that they could just generate new effects and drop in, or they could just transfer the entire program. They had to go back and get all that negative and rescan it all. It was incredible. It took 4 years and $12 million. The reason they didn't do Deep Space Nine and Voyager is because Next Gen didn't sell that well. It was being paid for by 3 different entities within CBS. And it would cost a lot more money because both Deep Space Nine and Voyager used a whole lot more CG for their effect shots. And so you'd have to up-res those. You'd have to find all the files. They were available. Mojo did some great Sacrifice of Angels. He did a great shot to show all that, what it would look like up-resed. But unfortunately, to do Deep Space Nine and Voyager, it would require at least 4 years per show, and you're probably looking at conservatively about $20 million each. So the problem is, who's going to pay for that money? No one's going to go fund $40 million, and who's going to do the work? So eventually what's going to happen is when you have quantum computing and upscaling that can give you what you want, we're just going to get upscale versions. Is that what I want? No, I would go back to the negative. But you need the will and you need the money. If I were David Ellison and I were the folks at CBS and Paramount now, I would spend the money because you've got to future-proof those shows. And I would do it correctly. I would hire those people back, as many as you can, and I would have CBS Digital, and you could do all of these things together. And I would hire Roger Lay Jr. and I back, and we would do special features for the entirety of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Never happened, but it should. And on that note, I'm going to say this. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I want to say thanks to Tom Jr. Jackson and to the entire moderating staff. I want to thank everybody that generously supports this channel via super chats and tips. We will have a Midnight Metal tonight. Not tonight, tomorrow night. Dave Parker and I are going to do Midnight Metal. Dieter Bastian and I will be back. And and I've got an upcoming Designing Hollywood that I'm recording tomorrow on Hamnet. I'm doing the production designer and costume designer. I mean, I'm not doing them. I'm interviewing them. And, of course, for all of you interested in my own particular work as a storyteller, if you haven't purchased True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak, written by the great Max Allan Collins, directed, edited, produced by myself along with my partners, but I directed it, is coming out on Tuesday. You can get it anywhere. You can get it on Audible. You should be able to get it on Spotify. If you want a hard copy version of it, you can get the CD. It's available at Amazon right now. True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak. Why don't I take you out with Michael Rosenbaum as Nathan Heller and Corey Landis as Walter Winchell. Walter Winchell's a real guy. Nathan Heller's fictional. That's kind of the fun of True Noir. I will be back tomorrow.
Outside in the warm Miami air, Winchell turned to me.
What was your name again, kid?
It's still Heller. Nathan S. Heller.
Aren't you gonna spell it?
Look, I don't want to be in your story.
Good, because you're not. You're Chicago, right?
Born and bred.
What do you make of that, in that cell back there?
You're New York. What do you make of it?
It's horseshit. I think that little bastard hit Cermak. I think he thinks he's dying from that stomach of his, and the mobsters probably promised to support his family back in Italy in return for him taking Tony out, and for his silence. What do you think?
I think you're right on the money. But if you print it, nobody will believe a word.
What's the guy to do? Bullshit they'll believe. Take it from me. Facts only bore 'em.